And yes, we're live with Robert Benedict. What's going on, dude?
Hey, Mike. Just surviving. How you doing?
Something pretty good. Something a little new I've been warming everybody up to is I want everybody included, right down to the followers. We make we don't discriminate anything. We want to hear from the fans too, and I want to hear your story because you're one of the guys. Let me just minimize this. That's been very active on Keep Rock Alive for a long time, and not
Well,
afraid to voice what you thought.
yeah,
So we
good
can
or
start.
bad, put it
Yeah,
out on the table. But I want to thank you for that because if it wasn't for you, there's a handful of newer bands that I've gotten into, and if you hadn't posted on like Twitter the little clips of the songs or whatever, which I listen to them, I listen to almost all of them. Sometimes I'll get 20, 30 seconds into one and go, okay, yeah, that's not really for me. And then sometimes I get hooked, but I do listen to all of them. And if it wasn't for those, I wouldn't know about some of the groups that I've gotten into. Griffin Tucker, that young man has the goods. He's a powerhouse. He doesn't know it yet, but he's a powerhouse.
he's very humble.
Yeah. And Tequila Mockingbird.
Yep, the girls from.
Yeah, I didn't know about the Birds until you came along. And then one group I got really into was Station. They're out of New York, right? So I got all their stuff. Black Swan's another one. But Station, I really started getting into. And I think I mentioned on Twitter that they sounded kind of like 80s music, but that's not true. I mean, 80s has like a kind of a synth pop kind of a, I don't know how you can categorize 80s music from a rock perspective, except unless you get into some of like, and Eddie Trunk hates to use this term, but I don't see it. It's not derogatory, but like hair metal, right? Hair band.
Yes, a lot of people.
But Station's not like that. Station has, when I think that they're like 80s, like they don't sound like 80s, like an 80s band, but they have that melodic, feel good kind of groove that if they were active in the 80s when I was in high school or right after, I would have really totally been into them, like Night Ranger and whatever. They have just a really solid
the song structure.
Yeah, they're just really, really good. So when I say they're kind of like 80s music, they make me feel like I'm a teenager again. Their music is just that good. It's uplifting and it's got a good groove to it. And it's just something I never tire hearing. So I really got into Station, but that's because of you. I would have never heard any of that. Like I don't, where do you go to listen to it, right? If you're not promoting it and we're not promoting it and somebody's not telling somebody, where do you go to hear new music?
That's the problem. The catch-22 is where do you go? And I found out the same thing. You and I just again talked for a little bit, just a few minutes. What got me involved in this? I was in the same position as you were 4.5, 5 years ago. I wasn't really not listening to anything new, and I wouldn't know where to find it. If you paid me.
Yeah.
But
it's different now, and I think promoting newer bands, younger bands. I think there's two sides of that coin, but I think promoting younger bands and newer bands is an important thing. Not necessarily younger bands. There are newer bands. I know some newer bands that are older guys, right? Like my age or whatever. So it's still new music. It's still new band, a new band. But I think promoting them is an important thing because when I was growing up, I mean, I watched WKRP on Cincinnati on TV, made me want to be a DJ. I was a DJ. I was a producer of a Saturday night program I'm in Columbus, Ohio, in the early 90s. And then I moved to Florida and I was a DJ. I was an on-air personality at a station, little station in Florida. But back in the day, we had MTV, we had radio stations. And if you heard something you didn't like on a radio station, you flip the channel to the next station and they were playing something else, right? And they would tell you who it was, and hey, that's the latest by Def Leppard, and hey, they got a new one coming out in June and whatever, and you knew that new music was coming, and now it's how do you hear? I mean, I follow bands that I, grew up with. I still see Iron Maiden live and Alice Cooper live, and like every year, Alice Cooper, Iron Maiden, Night Ranger, all the groups, Striper, all the groups I grew up with in high school, whatever, I still follow, and they're still playing and they're still making new music. But I follow them, and I have for 35 years, so I know what's going on. But how do you know, like, I don't know what's going on with newer bands until I find out that there's a newer band that I can follow,
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard until you figured out what I call, it's kind of like mining. And then when you do find one, you find, you find the vein, and that leads to others.
Yeah.
And then you meet the right people and overseas. But I wanted to say that you are the perfect example of what I was hoping for here, that not only are you open to listening to new music, your story is so common. What you just said is the same thing that most people say. And now you're hungering for it, and you're open to it. And you're honest about it too, because I am too. I say the same thing. Not all the music that I put up is music that I'm not saying it's bad or good, because my job is, I don't review or critique, but it may be a song that I'm not necessarily like, but I know somebody else will.
Right.
It's not my job. If I did that, then I may as well just put up my playlist. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to hear that from you, you play 20 seconds. This isn't for me. Go to the next one.
Right.
But once you're putting your money where your mouth is. Like I don't buy the music because I can't. Now there's so much I'm broke anyway, but I'd be even broker. But it really makes me feel good, and I'm seeing it that you are genuinely supporting the bands by purchasing physical copies of their music. That's the way they make the most money. Yeah. And just to keep them going.
Stacia, I tell you what, this COVID-19, this has been the worst year of my life for everything, work, money, but everything, including rock. But Station, I started getting into them just about a year ago. It was like, I think October-ish last year. And I had just, I got what was their latest album at the time, before the next one came out, I think in November, right? But like it was just a couple weeks before their new one came out, and they were playing like a little more than 2 hours away from me here in Ohio. Mm-hmm. And it was on a night when I had worked, and I had to work late, and there was no way I could get there before the show would be half over. I found out about the show the day before the show, so I couldn't schedule time off work and go. And I thought, oh, well, maybe they'll come up here and I'll get to see them next year. And then all hell broke loose this year, and I didn't get to see any bands this year. So like, I'm kicking myself because, I should have just called in sick, even though that's not who I am. I don't call in sick when I'm not sick. But I don't know how many times in my life, I had a friend of mine who's a guitar player who he is just fantastic, like prolific, like Eddie Van Halen prolific. Like he can write a song while he's talking to you, remember it without having to write it down, later, and he can do something else and write a song and play something completely new on the guitar. Never seen anything like it, like in my life, right? Like, I mean, I've seen it in some of the guitarists out there now, like Eddie Van Halen and, Nita Strauss, Hurricane Nita Strauss. She's another one. She's new. So I'm going to get off on a tangent. Nita is a new artist, in that she's young, and she just, like 2 years ago, this month, her first debut album came out. Now she plays lead. She played with the Iron Maidens, which was a tribute band, Iron Maiden tribute band. And then she got the lead job. She's the lead guitarist in Alice Cooper's show now, ever since Orianthi left. And she is just smoking good. I mean, when I go see Alice Cooper, and I love Alice Cooper, I go see Alice Cooper, half the reason I'm there is to see her play. It's just amazing. She's just fantastic. And, so I consider her a new artist because she has solo stuff out.
Oh, no, she is a new artist. She is a new artist. She busted her butt.
Yeah.
She's always worked. And another girl that deserves mention, the young girl that took her spot in the Iron Maidens, Nikki Stringfield.
Yep.
She's unbelievable too.
Yep.
But Nita right now, arguably one of the best just
Yep.
guitarists on the planet.
And what's good about Alice Cooper is he doesn't have an ego, and he won't let anybody in the band that has an ego, right? When they step up, when it's their turn to play their solo or do their thing, they represent Alice Cooper as a band, like the band Alice Cooper. Back in the day, it used to be the band was Alice Cooper, right? They become the rock star. They become up front, and he has no problem promoting them. And if they get a better gig, he lets them go, right? And I've heard there's a Netflix documentary on I think it's called Hired Guns or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but on guitarists and hired band members, and they say right on there that Alice Cooper pays more than most people do to to his band members, but he promotes them. And the last couple of shows I went to, he was like right at the merch table. It was Alice Cooper stuff and Nita Strauss stuff. And he let her sell her merch, her t-shirts and her CDs and everything, which is fantastic. He's not put off by somebody else making money at his merch table, and not a lot of bands will do that for their,
especially guys that have, if you want to call them legends, Alice Cooper's a legend.
Yeah.
And Nita, her most popular selling t-shirt is the "Stay Humble" or "Be Humbled."
Right.
She's got the same attitude, and she'll talk to every fan and take the time with kids, and that's what I think everybody needs, but not everybody's that way.
Right. She has a t-shirt she wears in a lot of the shows that I think it says "Ego kills talent." Mm-hmm. And I hope she holds on to that lack of ego.
Yeah, that's what she. If you listen to a lot of her interviews and her whole story, she had some demons and she went through some tough times.
Yeah.
She brought herself out of it. She worked herself out of it, cleaned everything up, and I mean, look how it's changed everything about her. She's awesome. She really is.
Yeah. But this friend of mine, his name Jimmy. I won't say his last name because he probably won't want me to. But Jimmy, he didn't do anything with his talent. I managed their band when I was like 18, and he was 18. Like the members of the band were like 18, and 19, I think, right? And I managed the band. They were a Christian metal group, and I got them around, in the mid to late 80s when nobody was. Like churches really didn't want Stryper, playing, and they didn't sound like Stryper, but I mean, churches were railing against Stryper, right? You can't be a Christian and play that kind of music or whatever. So it was kind of hard to get them gigs, but I got them some gigs in some churches and whatever, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was 18. So yeah, I can't really say I managed the band, even though I was their manager. I just helped promote them a little bit, but he got an offer from, and I don't know what record company it was, but he got an offer from a record company back in the early 90s. And he was at the signing table and walked away from it because of the business side of it. Like the record company wanted to own too much of his creative content and too much of his life, and he wasn't willing to do it. And he walked away from it and he never did anything with it. I mean, he plays guitar, at home, but he got married and had kids and never did anything with it. And it's such a shame. It's such a shame. But I think the music and regret it? Huh?
Does he look back and regret it, or?
I don't know. He does and he doesn't. He thinks he made the right choice for his sanity and for his happiness. But he would rather be playing and making money and doing that for a living. But he can't do that without the business side of the ugly side of the business side of music.
Comes with the territory.
He's okay with that decision. But I think now on top of that, and that probably still goes on, but on top of that, now we've got, how do you promote your stuff if you're in a band, and how do you sell it? Okay, you sell it at a gig, but how do you get people to the gigs? And you can sell it online, but how do you get people to buy it online? We don't have record stores where you can go through, like I used to go to the record store and go to the rock thing, and I'd go through, I'm like, oh, this looks interesting.
Right.
And I'd buy something I'd never heard before. And that was true with Christian rock. Stryper came out with, like, I got into Striper with Soldiers Under Command back in '85. And then they came out with To Hell with the Devil in October '86. And I'll never forget that day. I went to Buzzard's Nest Records. They are not there anymore. Bought the cassette, put the cassette in my car, and I was driving to a friend's house, and I was blown away by the first song. I had to back it up and listen to it again. And that kind of changed that industry, the Christian rock industry, because before then, Christian rock was not rock, not what I would call rock. But then there was all these other groups, and I would go to the record store and I would go to their Christian rock section. They finally had a Christian rock section, and it used to be just gospel, and it was like, stuff that, funeral marches I wouldn't listen to if I was dead. And I would go to the rock section, the Christian rock section, and I would look at, I'm like, oh, that looks cool. I'd see like the cover of something that looked cool, and I would buy that. And I found out about groups like Christovox and Shout and like Holy Soldier based on cover alone, because they were in the same bin with Striper, right? Like, but you can't even do that anymore because there's no record stores to thumb through stuff. And like, nobody cares about artwork on albums. Used to be a thing. It used to be such a big deal to like get the new album, you sit down, you open it up, you get the lyrics out, you put it on a record player, or you put the tape in or whatever, and you read the lyrics and you look at the artwork and you read who they thanked in the thanks section. Getting a new album in the 80s, when I was a teenager, was an event. Like, it was an event. If I would sit there and focus and study it and go through the whole thing over and over again until I had the thing memorized before day one was over. Or, you'd bring a friend over and you put it on and you talk about it and whatever. And, and that, how do we get that excitement about rock back? Because the industry doesn't go that direction. Now you can buy MP3 files and nobody cares about the artwork, and getting a new album is not an event anymore. And
that's the dichotomy here is, and this is all opinion again. And I've spoken with a few during these interviews, people where I say, I don't blame the music industry. I don't blame the major labels, because it was what you just said, the artwork. We got the final product and we appreciated it, but the label itself made money on the artwork because somebody was paid and they owned it, and they created, they printed it, all of that. You had people in house doing the liner notes, all that's gone. Like I said, right down to the guy that, they loaded it in the truck and it went down the road to the record store. That's all gone. So that's what's happened to the, again, in my opinion, the music industry it's lost control of itself, because now the music industry is pretty much just floating in space, and we're doing it right now, and like you said, everything's digital. Or how do you ask all the questions that these bands today, and I say to them right out, I never ever sugarcoat anything. You guys are living in the toughest possible time to be a rock band, even just music itself, but at least the more popular music, you have a better chance.
Right.
Rock right now, we're looking up. We're looking at these other genres of music. We really are. But for these bands, especially this year, what more could you possibly endure? Mostly where you sell your merchandise is at a gig. Like you said, at a merch table, that's gone. So now you got to get, you can have the greatest online merch store in the world. If nobody knows about it, you're not going to sell anything.
Right.
So this all leads back to what I appreciate about a guy like you. And we have many people, I don't know, but there's a lot of people that interact so much. I've literally gotten to kind of know you.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of weird. And, to see that you're genuinely reaching in, you're what every band wants. A true new fan that is waiting. Their music's coming. Now you're watching them, you're following them. You bought their music. You might, whatever else you decide to do. You're a genuine fan, and you're a fan old school like we must not be too far apart age-wise, because I'm 54 and I grew up that same time.
Yep, I'll be 52 Christmas Eve. So.
All right, we're the same. So, and if you want to get technical, I know you're a huge Striper fan. I know you're a huge Night Ranger fan. All right. You know, I told you before how KRA started because of a girl that I started helping promote. Technically, this is all because of Michael Sweet.
Really?
God's honest truth. And had I not seen a video, I was supposed to go to a concert at the Chance Theater in Poughkeepsie. I wanted to go see Striper. I hadn't seen him, and they just happened to be playing. It was the Fallen tour. Right before it, yeah, right before it was released, and couldn't make it. And then the next day, I saw on Facebook he posted a video of some kid singing "To Hell with the Devil," and he calls out this 15-year-old at the time kid, and I'm like, oh God, this is gonna be a train wreck. Well, let me listen to it anyway, just to see what I missed, and that was it.
Yeah.
I saw long story. You know the rest of the story now.
Yeah.
But it's because of Michael. And,
Wow.
But that's pretty much. But by chance, we don't, like you said, and back in the '80s, we had magazines, and it was almost like following the story, and they give you a heads up on what's coming.
Yep.
And then your favorite bands, it made it easier because at least you had your list of bands, and then you turn on the radio and you might this new band from England,
Yep.
and there was a steady stream of we knew where to go. Yes, did they control what we were going to hear next? Yeah, but the rock and roll was so powerful then. The better of the bands was heard.
You know what's another important thing is, now me, I'm old. I wanted to go home and go to bed, right? So like one thing about Alice Cooper, like I had tickets to see him this June, and it was going to be Lita Ford, Alice Cooper, and Tesla, right? Not in that order. But usually Alice Cooper doesn't have an opening band. And if the show starts at 8 o'clock, boom, lights go out, they have the thing, and he comes out like on fire. And that's what I like. I don't like, as I've gotten older, I don't like opening bands. I want to go see the band I paid to see and go home. But opening bands are so important for promoting new bands, because back to Striper, there was a group called Hurricane. I saw Striper on the To Hell with the Devil tour, and Hurricane was on their record label, which was Enigma back in the day. And they weren't a Christian band, but they were like a hair metal, band. And they opened for Striper, and I saw them 2 cities or 3 cities where they opened, and I was hooked. Like by song 3 of their set, I've got to find out who these guys are, right? And they had like an EP out, and then like they had a new album coming out within a couple weeks, so I went and got that. Firehouse, who interestingly, everything goes back to Striper. Firehouse is a bass player. Perry Richardson is now playing for Striper. But Firehouse, I saw Firehouse open for Tesla back in the day. And then that got me into Firehouse, right? So the opening bands, I think some of these established bands should probably have some newer bands or local newer bands, like play for them. And I know Striper did do that for a while back in when they started to come back, late 90s, early 2000, right? 2000, 2001, they would have a local band, like they would play the different Hard Rocks or was it Hard Rock? Was House of Blues? They did like a tour of a bunch of House of Blues or whatever. And they would have a local band come in and open for them, and that was good because it was good to promote the local band, and the fans of the local band would come to see them. And the fans of Striper that were there to see Striper would be like, hey, this is cool. These guys are local. Then they'd start going, and then it kind of built up a following. So I think opening bands, live shows, opening bands are a big deal. I think as much as I would like to go home and go to bed when the concert's over because I'm tired, that's just me. I'm just old now. But I think
it's not so much opening bands. Also, it's opening bands that play original music.
Yes. Well, yeah. No, I mean, nobody wants to see. Well, maybe it's true, nobody wants to see a tribute band open for. I mean, I don't want to see a Kiss tribute band open for, Def Leppard or whatever. But when I mentioned those two sides of the coin, right? So the other side to the coin of getting the new music out there and promoted is getting young people now, teenagers and young 20s or whatever, that are into this flash in the pan, nonsensical stuff that's borrowed from any, like a lot of kids today don't know what rock is. And I think the flip side of that coin is getting some of the younger people interested into rock, right? So like I do like amateur magic, I'm not a like full-time magician, but I do magic. And there's a couple of my full-time magician friends, Eric Jones is one that uses this phrase. He's always saying, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Meaning that without the Harry Houdinis and the David Copperfields and the Doug Hennings, he wouldn't have a job, right? He wouldn't have won on Penn and Teller Foolish. That wouldn't have happened. Same thing with music. Like rock is built on the shoulder, of giants. The new groups now and the groups, I listened to in the 80s, they were built on the shoulders of giants, right? Beatles and Hendrix and then you get into the 70s when, rock started getting more melodic and you got your Bostons and your Eagles and your, Kansas and whatever, these groups that built on top of that. And then the 80s and they built on top of that. And so, I think getting some of the younger people to understand the history of rock and get into some of the older rock might inspire them to actually learn to, write their own stuff and play, get into playing music and, keeping rock alive. Like, they might be interested in doing that. Now I don't, there just seems, maybe it's just the industry, but it seems as there's less rock bands out there available. Everything is pop and flash in the pan and selling MP3, for a week and a half until it's no longer popular and then sell another MP3.
We've been throwing the word disposable around a lot lately.
Exactly.
It is disposable. And something else that you've answered a lot of your questions, but and some of the statements you made earlier was by asking and answering a few of the earlier questions, like why don't these kids now? We didn't consume music. We lived it and owned it and held it, and it's just part of us. And, we can probably, if we could draw from memory, we can draw out an album cover from 35, 40 years ago and tell the story of the first time we heard X band. And today, it's too easy for them. Right down to not just how they can listen to music, and then it's tossed away in 2 weeks. It's also how they can create music. If you decided as a kid, 17, 15, 13, whatever, to learn how to play, an instrument. Now they hear this music that's on the mainstream, that's basically all digitally created in one way or the other.
Right.
I tell you, I wouldn't even know how to do it, but I would say, because I want to learn how to play guitar. It's way easier than learning to, spending years of practice and learning to play instruments.
Yep.
Unless you're just born with that gift like Griffin. I always busted. I said, I'm going to find an instrument one day that you can't play. And he just laughs because he probably could. He could play a wheelbarrow if,
I'm telling you, that young man's got the goods, but yeah.
But you know what I mean? Is it's just too easy. So why am I going to waste my time unless it's in them that, like the first time you might have stood in front of a live band and, and you felt those amplifiers, because there's nothing like it. And you can still
Iron Maiden, October 3rd, I think it was, but it was October 1983. I was 14.
That's the way to break in. That was your first concert?
Yeah, they really set the bar. Yeah.
And we still won you over. You're still looking at new music in 2020.
Yeah.
For the most part, these kids, they take it. It's all tied together. They stay home playing video games or they're online and on their devices, and then I can make songs and get them on YouTube in 10 minutes. Literally, we're gonna make a song. Look at TikTok and all these things. It's just changed everything.
And if they do go to a live show now, like I'm really gonna sound really old now, but I hear the Lady Gaga is a different story, right? She does her own stuff or whatever. I don't know, but
she's brilliant. She really.
You know, she really impressed me. I heard her on like the Howard Stern show one time. It was just her, a microphone, and the piano, and she sang a song called Gypsy. And that was the first time I was impressed. And she was talking about like she likes metal, she likes rock.
She she's not um, she's not a closet rocker. She
No,
is a
no,
rocker. She
right. So
really is.
I don't know what her shows are like, but a lot of like I
Shows are
think the
pop.
young people, huh?
Her shows are pop. You
Does
know.
she have a live band though? Because that's where I'm going. Is like a lot of the shows
Oh
now.
yes, she's on stage playing too, and you know
Okay,
there's the big production, but it's live band, and she'll somewhere along the way she'll pick up the guitar, sit behind the
right.
piano. I mean, she's the real thing, and so is her
Well,
music.
that's
Just
what
not
I
on.
think. That's what we need, right? Because I think like you go to Justin Bieber concert or you go like if these kids go to some of
Oh,
these other newer bands, it's all piped in music and
well,
they
there's a
got
turntable.
dancers or whatever and there's
Yeah, there's one DJ. That's the
but
whole thing.
you know there's I think something that would inspire, you know, like I was inspired. I always had to have music on. My grandmother told me the story many times, and she told my wife when I got married, and like uh, divorced now, but she told my wife, you know, before I could speak, I had to have music on, and it had to be rock. Before I could speak, I was in rock music. They would put me in the car on the front seat. This is before car seats, right? I could barely stand up. I was a
Station
baby.
wagon problem.
But they would put me in the car and I would point at the radio before I could say even mama. I'd point at the radio and just scream bloody murder until somebody turned the radio on. I knew that's where the music came out of. And if they put Lawrence Welk on or Barry Manilow or whatever, I would scream until they turned it to a rock station. Before I could talk, I was into rock music. And there's something that like, I don't play any instruments, but I wanted to be in radio. I wanted to be involved. I mean, I play some percussion like congas and bongas or whatever. I can keep a beat, but I'm not a musician by any stretch. But there's something inspiring about when you go to a live show and you see somebody putting their heart and soul and sweat into what they're doing, and they're making music with their fingers in front of your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they break a string and don't miss a beat. Break a stick, don't miss a beat, you know, that there's just something about the talent and professionalism of seeing somebody that do something on stage that you know would throw you off, you know, and they breeze right through it like, you know, bulletproof, you know, and then that makes you think, man, I would love to do that. Like I would love to be able to pick up a guitar and have that many people screaming at me and looking at me and whatever, and then do that and not lose my beat. And I think that seeing live bands, I think that can inspire people to want to do that. Like that's,
Absolutely.
you hear all the time about actors. Well, I saw Citizen Kane and I knew that's what I wanted to do. And then they became actors and they stayed actors. I think it's the same goes with live music, right? And I think we've lost the
Had a few
blood, sweat,
people,
and tears of it all.
a couple of the conversations I've had in last week, and it came up once, and it's true. And he said, I wasn't sure. He says, I might be full of shit, but I thought I heard that this year Fender sold more guitars this year than they have in who knows how long. And the truth is, yes, absolutely. These kids are home. People are home. It's not just kids. It's even, you know, older people, you know,
right.
People our age, and investigating new things. And, you know, maybe it crossed their mind years ago and they said, screw it, you know, I'm going to buy a guitar and just try. So hopefully out of all this mess, things like, you know,
Yeah.
We're going back to maybe even more the simpler things.
Yeah.
Even kids that have been, you know, that before COVID were, you know, playing video games on these binges or whatever they do, are finally saying now that I'm home literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, are getting tired of it and, you know, looking for other outlets. And I tell you, I mean, I'm no great musician by any stretch of the imagination either, but you can't see him. There's one here, there's one there, there's one behind this green screen over here, and I love it. You just can't explain it. And the other thing, like you said about, you know, a rock artist or even most musicians, But I think more in rock is the perfection is it's not perfect. Things can go wrong, and that makes it even more special moment. You know, it's when you broken stick, something falls over, someone falls over the stage, you know, break a string.
Some of the best, I think some of the best things in rock happen by accident. I think,
Absolutely.
you know, more than what I know in my head. But I mean, you know, like just off the top of my head, like the Beatles, right? So I don't know if you like the Beatles or not, but
Absolutely. They were the band that got me into rock and roll. I put it up today.
all right. So so when uh they had done take after take after take of Helter Skelter,
Mhm.
and Ringo was like, I got blisters on my fingers. Now, when I was a kid, for some reason I always thought it was John fooling around, but come to find out it was Ringo, right? And his hands were blistered because they had gone take after take. And from what I understand, Paul used to do that. He's like, no, let's do it again. And but that is, and since then, you know, they come out with the box sets and the special editions or whatever, and you got all these different cuts of the same song, right? So I've heard 10 different cuts of that song. That's my favorite. I know that why that ended up on the record, because that turned out to be the best one. But there's something about that. I got blisters on my fingers, and you hear the sticks bounce, right? Like that. That's rock, right? Like that's not music and like in there, but it's rock. It's heart, it's soul, and it wasn't planned, and it wasn't that wasn't intended to be, you know, choreographed into the song, but it makes the song that much greater. You know,
it's a problem that I've been mentioning more and more, and now that I'm doing these things, and this is why I want Robert. You're like you're an excellent example of the type of fan that we need, and you're telling me right now all the things you're answering questions that people from the perspective of just a fan, and this I hope bands listen to, because you don't see this often, I don't think, and I'm willing to try anything. I want to hear the perspective of a fan. This way, the artists now can learn from them. You're an older fan. Let's be honest. So am I. Okay.
Yeah.
But also, what
thanks for pointing that out.
Oops. Hey, well, one thing we're brutally honest here. Okay. And I guarantee you that's not alcoholic. You know, I'm drinking a coffee.
This is water.
Water. Hey, we're such party animals now. Right? And we're going to sleep right after this. But to hear from the perspective of, you know, what fuels everybody. And what did you just say? And something that we say was in the older music, the soul and the feel and those mistakes and those little things. You know, something I hear in the music today, and I hear we talk about it. There's a lot of great new music out there, but sometimes it's a little too polished. And before all this, I didn't understand what Pro Tools was till 4 or 5 years ago. And you know, I heard about how you can mix your music on the computer and stuff, but I didn't know exactly what it meant, that you can take a song and basically manipulate everything right down to the time and have it perfect, you know, like the metronome. And that's not rock and roll. It's that way. AC/DC is a perfect example of, you know, they said they've set the timing to the songs, and where it was X beats here, and you know, we don't notice it, but that's the feel of the song. That's the beauty of it. If you make it just perfect, yeah, it sounds good, but it doesn't have the soul.
Right.
And that's what, you know, it goes back to live recording. You're not going to see that anymore because it costs too much money. Like you said, take after take after take after take. No, one take. Oh, you missed the drum strike here. We'll fix it. Bass note wrong here. We can take care of that too. You know, you don't have to play it again.
Yep.
That's taking the soul out of the music. But you know, some bands, I tell them, just go back to being just simple. Don't go crazy. Don't worry about it. If it's that little off thing that might be the one point of the song that, like you just said, you remember 50 years later. That's what made it special.
Yeah.
But and you didn't even get to where you're originally from. You're from Ohio, correct?
I'm from Florida. I was born in
It's the other way around. Okay.
And then right before high school, like 3 weeks before high school, my dad got a job offer. We moved from Florida to Ohio.
Okay.
In '82. And then I spent my high school years in Ohio. 8 years after, we had a really bad winter, and the company I worked for like 5 years went out of business and gave me a nice severance check. I'm like, I'm out of here, going back to Florida. So I went back to Florida, and I moved back up here to Ohio last year, mid-year last year. And
I remember what way you said you were gonna fly. I just, couldn't remember.
yeah, so I went to high school up here, and all of my memories are tied to music, right? So I had to have music on when I was a baby, and all my important memories and everything in my life is tied to music. Like, so I went to high school up here, and I have friends who are more like brothers to me that there's a handful of them that I still see regularly. And I've known them for 38 years, and met them the first day of school, ninth grade, after moving up here from Florida. I still know them. They're still friends. And there's certain musical songs or musical cues or whatever remind me of certain places and certain people. Like, everything is tied to music.
That's a trigger. Flashbacks.
Huh?
Yeah, music is a heck of a trigger of flashbacks.
Yeah. I don't think that's true anymore. I mean, like my really good friend Danny, he's got some kids, right? He's got several kids, and they range from their early 20s into down to 17, right? They're all like teenage, those years that I was into rock and into music, and and they don't seem to me, from what I've witnessed, to really care about music. Whatever's the popular thing.
For us, it'll bring us back to our childhood where
right, but they're not connected.
Heard it first or anywhere. Right. But today, no, because here today, gone tomorrow is the way the music is.
And they're not looking to buy tickets to go to concerts or see anybody live. Like, that's not in their vision. That's not what they're into. And
there's another thing right there that ties into, I don't know, with your magic, but just entertainment in general. The clubs, not seeing as much business, especially from the younger kids. I say younger kids, teens, 20s.
Right.
But that's the reason for so many cover bands. They got to stay open, so you hire cover bands. So guys like us show up. You just got to pay the bills, and then maybe a headliner. And you see these other the bands from the 80s coming back and swinging around, North America, wherever. So, but
some of them
kids going out nowadays. It's not like it used to be. We look forward to the weekend and say, hey, where you going Saturday? You guys going out Friday? No, we're gonna go whatever. Hey, the concerts coming up. You knew the concerts that were coming. You bought your tickets in advance. You had to get the Ticketmaster. When you actually had to go to Ticketmaster or it was the place around here was called Soundtracks. It was a record store, and they had their own little computer terminal with the binder and all the seating charts in there. We're section 206, and it was actually a book.
Yeah.
Now, but
that first Iron Maiden concert I went to, I had to. The record store no longer exists anymore, but I stood outside in the weather, and I'm not a morning person. I like to get up about the crack of noon. Even now, it doesn't matter what time I go to bed. I've never been a morning person, but like 5, 6 in the morning, I'm in a line waiting until 10 o'clock in the morning when the store opens up to buy the tickets, and you're standing out there in the weather, rain or shine, cold, doesn't matter. That's when you stood in line and you took your tent or your raincoat or whatever, and you waited and you bought your tickets and you got the seat you got, and you didn't have the promoters getting all the seats first, and you didn't, and if you could get there early enough or camp out the night before and be there at the front of the line, first, second, third, fifth person in line, you were going to get first row. That's just the way it was. That was another thing. That was an event. It's a pain in the ass, but it was an event. Like
it's fondness. That was part of the, that was part of the fun. Couldn't do it. But what's the irony now that, we look at what you want to say killed music or changed music to the way it is today. But there is one time that these guys, these kids now that we say don't do this, will go stand online and wait overnight for something. There's one thing.
iPhones.
Yep. The thing that represents everything that killed music. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So everything again is tied together. That's 6 degrees of separation or whatever you want to call it. But it literally represents everything in one device that hurts all these bands that, like you said, where it's hard to find them.
Yep.
You can do just about everything on that iPhone, right down to record music. It's crazy.
You know what's sad though is when I was a kid, I used to have like a tape recorder. It was a one speaker, single tape recorder with a handle on it. I would take that and like bungee cord it to my bike or my back. I didn't have a book bag at the time, and like any way to get music to go with me. And then when I moved here to Ohio, my dad said if I got on a roll, he'd buy me a moped so I could get around. He was basically tired of driving me everywhere because we lived out in the country. So to go anywhere, visit my friends, it was, he's like, I'll buy you a moped because you could get one at 13 back then and drive wherever you wanted to go. You were going 25 miles an hour to get there, but it's like, and so I had a boombox and I bungee corded it I always had to have music. And the most, like when I was a teenager, when I bought a car, right? The most important thing to me, the most important running part of a car is the radio. Oh, yeah. And today, I just bought a new car 2 weeks ago, and that's still, I'm so excited that the radio in this one was better than my 2018.
First thing we play with, even now, is before you even start it, you might put it the ignite. Well, I don't even know. It shouldn't say it that way. It's not a key anymore, but depending on what. But the first thing you do is you turn the radio on, no matter what.
Yep, no matter what. And what gets me now is in the 80s, if I have a jump drive in my car, right, has 4,000 songs on it. And I have an MP3 player that's, nobody uses those anymore. It's, 6 or 8 or 10 years old or whatever, but it holds 3,300 songs on that thing, right? So if I could have taken something this big and had earbuds and taken 3,300 songs with me wherever I went, you're right. And I can do that now on my iPhone. I got like 20 gig of music on my phone, right? That's revolutionary to me from coming from where I did with music, right? Where like for a long period of time in my life before cassettes came out, there were 8 tracks, which sucked, but you couldn't take music with you. You had to sit at home with the record player in front of the record player and listen to it, or listen to whatever they played you on the radio. You didn't have the choices you had now. Man, to have the technology we have now in the mid 80s where I could take 4,000 songs with me, I'd have been in heaven. And I kind of still am. I like having the digital music. And that's the other thing is thankfully, I'm at the point in my life when I was 20, I had 0 disposable income. I had a kid, and then I went through a divorce, and then I had, half my money taken in child support and all that. And so I had no disposable income. But now as an adult, and I've got disposable income, like I don't want to spend my retirement money on it, but I buy stuff twice now. I will buy the physical CD copy, and then I'll buy the MP3, like Iron Maiden, like they just came out with, they're not a new band, but they just came out with a new live album from their last year's tour. They had a special edition one, like with a booklet and the whole thing. I bought one of those, pre-ordered it. They have the regular CD, which I bought that goes in the car so I can listen to it. And then I pre-ordered it on iTunes so that as they release songs, I got the new songs. And so I've got the whole album 3 times. And the same thing with like the station, like these new guys, I got it on MP3. I've got it on digital through Bandcamp is where I got it from. But I got it digital and I got the physical copy. There's something about the physical copy I just can't divorce myself from. But I support the bands in that, like, from me, they're getting even more money because like I'm buying it twice. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I could burn this to, you know, like I could rip it off and put it in MP3 and then put it on my jump drive and put it in the car. That's a lot of work. I just give them another $12 and I get a second copy. But
you're every band's dream.
Huh?
You're every band's dream is what you are.
But I have the disposable income to do that. Like, you know, when I retire, I won't. And I didn't back in the day. But I just think the younger generation, like I'm sounding old again, but the younger generation is missing out on so much because you have, and vinyl's coming back. So you've got vinyl and you've got CDs and you've got, you know, digital MP3s and like, for a music lover, that's a dream. You can listen to music anywhere, anytime, and you don't have to carry anything with you.
It's true. My father couldn't believe it when I started to show him. Like he was listening to his oldies stuff on YouTube, and then I showed him some of the streaming platforms, and my grandfather used to play. I shouldn't say. My grandfather's brother used to play with Ted Lewis. He was the old vaudeville act of Me and My Shadow.
Okay. And
he was the shadow. But I was over the house one day and I logged in and I said, listen to this. And he goes, is that what I think? I said, yeah. I said, you can get this music all the way back to the 20s. If it was recorded, it's out there. They could, you know, the KRA, they have everything now. But I mean, look at, like you said, we had to adapt. You know, when we bought a car, I think the first truck, I had to have a truck when I was up here with horses. It was a pickup. It had an AM FM radio. It was a GMC pickup. And I went out and bought, back in the day, it was a Spark-O-Matic stereo.
Yep.
With cassette.
I remember Spark-O-Matic.
Yeah, it was amazing. You don't realize, you look back and what a piece of junk this thing was, but it worked. But before that, I remember when I'd go use my parents' Suburban, that 8-track in it. And I went and bought the adapter, the 8-track cassette adapter, which as that was. Then, you know, now you had the cassette player in your vehicle in the 80s, and now they came out with CDs. And then you got the CD Walkman. Oh, I can play. Now they got the cassette adapter that you plug into the auxiliary jack on your, so then you had, everything was on your seats everywhere, unless you were neat enough and kept it in some kind of organizer. But
you know what I got into, nobody else got into, like it was big in Japan for a little while. I bought mini discs. There were CDs that were like, you know, that big, and they came in like a little, remember the old, you know, floppy drives that you would put in the computer? It came in a case like that, but it was a CD. And they were rewritable. That was the first rewrite before CD burner came out.
It was JVC, I think, was big. They started it because I watched that guy. I don't know if you watch on YouTube, Techmoan from UK. He does all that vintage stuff and really reviews it and restores them. And he had a bunch of them. And I couldn't. And he said the same thing. You could buy them by the bag now, hundreds of them for nothing.
I sold all that last year for next near to nothing when I moved, but I had a whole I had a boombox that had a mini disc player on it. I had a console and I had a recorder on it, and it had all these little knobs. The editing on it was so good. I liked a live version of a Meatloaf song, but I liked the intro, the studio intro. And I remember I was so proud of myself when I first got that. I merged the two, the studio intro to the live song, and I blended them. So, and it was like, it became a hobby, and I would make my own like CDs on the mini discs and whatever. And it was a lot of fun, but yeah, I thought that was going to be the next biggest thing, and it didn't go anywhere, but it should have.
MP3 showed up too fast is what happened.
Yeah.
It didn't have any.
Well, that went south before even MP3s showed up. But what I used to do is I would take it to concerts and I would put it in a fanny pack, because I had like a portable one, you know, and I would put it in a fanny pack, and they would search me, right? And I had a lapel mic running up the inside, and I I only did it for one particular band, and I'm not going to say who it is.
Bootlegging.
Right.
You're gonna say.
I only did it for one band that I was in. I was really into this one artist for a while. I wouldn't really call that artist rock, but I was really into them for a while, followed them around. But I would go to the concerts, and I would have a fanny pack on, and they would have to search it. I would zip it open, pull it out, and palm it, use like a magic technique, right? I would palm the stupid player in one hand, and they'd look in the bag, and there'd be nothing in. There'd be a couple spare batteries and a couple of blank mini discs, but they didn't know what those were, and there was nothing else in the bag. And then as I zipped it back up, I would just drop it back into the bag. I would palm the thing, and I had a lapel mic running up my shirt, clipped on my shirt, and I would just not scream, because if I screamed or hollered or sang along, it got, on. But so I would quietly record these concerts on the mini disc thing, and then I would transfer those to CD. But you could put separators, like song separators, and there was a couple of CDs I got, and they had song separators were just really weird on them. There was a stick CD I didn't like, where they separated some songs. Striper, when they came out with To Hell with the Devil on CD, that The Abyss, the beginning of that song, is instrumental. Well, they put a separator between that and the beginning of the song, so it's a separate. To Hell with the Devil's a separate song, and I'm like, it needs a beginning. So I would record it to mini disc, merge them, record that back to CD, so I could get the song the way I wanted it.
Because the Abyss faded out.
Yeah,
and then To Hell with
it
the
didn't go anywhere. The mini disc, that was a waste of $600 or $700 I spent on that. The first console I bought.
At the moment, you don't know, because at that moment that's cutting edge, and you're like, wow,
Right.
And you look back and think, wow, that's how many formats ago.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I still, I can't get away from the physical format though. I still go back to CDs. Like I said, I buy things digitally, and in the car I listen to. It's a mix, right? Some of it's digital, and some of it is CD. But I got a couple CD cases in the car, because I still have to have. I want the physical CD, So, and I'm not promoting Station over and over again. I don't work for the band. It's close by. So when I talk about CDs, I can grab it.
It's the way we were, let's say it's what we grew up with. And that's why, we enjoy and we feel that connection to the physical copy. But, like the kids today, even though we might try to push it and say, hey, but they're not going to feel that, because they weren't born with it. They were born with, a device, an iPhone, a tablet, whatever, and that's their connection.
Right.
Well, my father, back then it was, when he was in the 50s, and it was a 45. Albums, kids didn't buy albums. The old folks bought the albums. Classical music, first 78s and albums were actually separate, individual, two-sided, full-size records.
Right.
In a book that opened up with 5, 6, 7 different records, because that's what it meant by album. Nobody really understands that. And then Columbia created the real album that we know today on vinyl, 33 1/3.
Right.
That's what you said. Also, you said it before, the history of the music that's part of the fun.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you can buy like single songs now, right? MP3s. And I was going to say that wasn't the way when I was a kid, but it was, because you mentioned 45s. I used to go to the record store in the mall and skim through the 45s, and they would have the top 40, like, Billboard top 40
by themselves, and little sleeves. They'd have the top 40, and then what fell off or was on its way up was in another case by itself under the artist name. So, if somebody fell out of the top 40, that went to the bin, basically we're turned in the bargain bin.
And that got you interested in new music too, because there was always the B-side, right? And then the B-side would be some like deep track on that album. And then if you liked the B-side too, then the next step was buy the album. Well, I remember that I used to go buy 45s all the time. They were less than $1 when I was a kid.
99 cents, 69 cents back then.
Yep. I think 69, 79 cents. Yeah. And I remember the very first album I bought, like the first concert I ever went to was Iron Maiden, 1983. But the first album I bought on my own. Now I had, like, for Christmas, I got Kiss. I had the Kiss Dynasty. I got Kiss Destroyer. I had Eagles Hotel California. I had that on 8-track too. Had Destroyer on 8-track too. But I had music. I had albums, but my parents bought them for me. I got them for Christmas, or got them for my birthday, or my parents bought the first album. Huh?
That's how I started. Kiss Destroyer was my first rock
Yeah.
album.
The first album I bought all on my own. I didn't ask permission. I didn't borrow any money, or my parents didn't. I don't remember how I got the money, like probably mowing lawns and whatever. But and back then I think an album was like $6, right? $5.99 or whatever it was in 1980. But the very first album I ever bought, I took my own money that I earned myself. I got on my bike. I didn't ask any permission. I didn't tell my parents I was going to do it. I rode my bike several miles to a Kmart on Blanding Boulevard in Orange Park, Florida. And it's not there anymore. But I rode my bike to the Kmart. I went to the record section and I picked out AC/DC's Back in Black. And it was new. It was pretty new, right? Like I had heard one or two songs from it, and there was even as a kid in my middle school, there was a AC/DC tribute band, and they won the talent contest every year. My middle school had a talent contest, and they won the talent contest. But I drove my bike to Kmart and bought Back in Black when it was still new with my own money, and then came home, took it out, played it, whatever. But that was the very first album, like full album, not 45, that I bought myself. I still remember that. See, these things were events. These kids are missing out.
I remember pumping gas at my father's gas station in the city. It was maybe 3/4 of a mile from my junior high school. And I'd walk down there. My godfather worked there. They were partners. And I'd go pump gas. And I didn't know, you didn't know what the value of money was back then. And in 1977, 78, 79, you're getting handed a dollar. And then you're a kid, 40. At the end of the day, you got 40, $50. That was a lot of money then. I didn't know, but I remember going and buying myself, and I kick myself in the butt now, but now I wish I kind of had it. Do you remember Panasonic had they called it the handle. It was the 8-track player. It was just a cube, and it had the T-bar on the top that when you did this would change. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what I had. But then I had no 8-tracks, and I remember listening. The first thing my mother put in it was soundtrack to Grease. I was like,
I had that. That's
everyone did. Yeah, because you know what? I don't care, as rock as we are, whatever. I know the words to every song from Grease.
Me too.
All the disco songs that we say we hated back then, you still know the words. It's just, but it was just fun. And like I said, I look back on those years and I still have dreams about it, talk about it all the time. And I just wonder what are these kids going to look back, like say in, 30, 40 years and say, hey man, remember when we downloaded that one song we listened to that weekend? And we played World of Warcraft for a year straight and never left our room, surrounded by Hot Pockets and I don't know, chicken bones.
Right.
I just can't relate to this. Going in the basement and one of my favorite stories. Eddie hearing Van Halen the first time, my buddy coming out with the record. I tell these stories over and over, and I still get you get that same glint in your eye. But I'm definitely, I am so happy because this is the first time I've tried this now, is having who I call, I say it's Keep Rock Alive is about 3 things really. The bands, the artists, and the fans. That's it.
Yep.
I don't get, I'm just here to hopefully put those things together and to see what you're doing. And I'm definitely, with your permission, I make clips of these. I take out you see that I've been using those. Take them out of, and the station is going to get tagged. Listen, here's a perfect example of,
right.
And show other people. This is what I want people to see that it can be done. Let's call us a couple of, not older, seasoned rockers is what we'll be. Okay. We're a little more seasoned. but it can be done. You can do both. We can still love the classics
Right.
and appreciate and fall in love with the new.
Right.
There's plenty of room.
And
You're not cheating.
and I think rock is so universal, right? And is so diverse. And there's not a color to rock. There's not an age limit to rock, right? So I think we got to get the old guys, the old folks listening to the newer stuff and supporting us, especially like guys our age, like 30s, 40s, 50s that have an established life and have an extra $12 to spend on, a new CD, or, drop $40. I can't believe t-shirts are like $45 now at concerts, but like drop $45 on a t-shirt, and support the band. So we got to get the guys our age and people our age to support the newer, younger bands so that they have a future, so they can keep doing it. But we also have to get the younger folks that are listening to Justin Bieber's and whatever to realize what they're missing, maybe get them hooked on some of the older stuff so that they want to start their own band. So, like I would hate rock and the history it's had. And, growing up, it was always rock and roll forever. Rock and roll is never going to die. Rock and roll will never die. They sang that in the 50s. Rock and roll will never die. Right. But I hope it doesn't go the way of vaudeville based on digital technology.
But
I don't know.
and I mean but what you just said about rock and roll, that song has been written over and over again through the history of rock and roll. The Who, it's over and over. Rock is dead. And you know what? It's 2020. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we're still sitting here talking about it. We're talking about new music.
Yeah.
So it's the one genre that's always seemed to where the cockroach in the nuclear holocaust, that for some it always seems to keep going. It sneaks back out from under the rock.
I hope so. I hope it keeps going long after
I
I'm
love
gone.
it. I mean, but you know what? I think because people over time, finally relent and go, it's awesome. Everything else kind of times out. They come and go, and they all have their history, but it's more of a history of memories. We have our history of memories, and even now we're still looking forward to a future. It just keeps evolving. Not many other genres of music do that.
Well, I think you're on the right track. I think you need help. I think more people should do what you're doing. But like I said, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have. Huh?
There are a lot of people. I've met more people, and you've seen how we've all kind of either worked together at one point, crossed paths. I've met people from all over the world. Somebody that I just tripped over by accident and posted a song 2 years ago who opened me up to the UK scene, which is phenomenal. And even though I'll be honest, I'm going to say it right now, we don't talk anymore. Anna Stella, but I will give her credit 100%. And I've always support what she does. Had she not sent me one song, I may have eventually found out, but all these bands that you saw that I posted from over there, Massive Wagons, Hollow Star, I found Marissa and the Mall, all those bands. I never, Tomorrow's Lost, who I love, I would never have found them had it not been for her. And that's why I loved it. But the problem is, and I think I've learned, and I don't want to get into this, which I call the social media stuff.
Right.
Everybody, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm no angel. I mean, and I call myself an asshole. I'm an idiot from New York City, and I got an attitude sometimes, but I really don't have an ego, and I love to help people. It's not about taking credit, because you found the station through me, okay? But I found whoever through someone else. That's the way it's supposed to be. Like when we were kids, and my buddy came running out with the Van Halen album. I had no fucking idea who Van Halen was.
Yep.
42 years later, and what we've watched all this time, and we watched the man pass away. And do I give that kid credit? Well, yeah, I'm glad he came out with the album, but he took it from his brother.
Right.
That's how it used to be. So what's the difference? Why?
Right.
It shouldn't be about us. It should be, like, so I say, it should be about, the fans and the bands, and helping them and not just immediately scoffing at them because they don't sound like 1970 something, and we had the flip side of Greta, like perfect example is Greta Van Fleet. It was the similarities they had with Led Zeppelin that got them to notice, and then inevitably it was, and I said this long ago, they really better fess up or at least acknowledge that Led Zeppelin is somewhat, influenced them, and they didn't, and it blew up on them. And what was it, last month? They had a song come out, nobody even knows. It came and gone. It didn't. It had zero staying power. Don't piss off rock fans. We're not. You can't. You're not going to pull the wool over rock fans' eyes.
And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about like they're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And I think the newer bands that know that, I think have a better shot at a future of being one of the giants. Griffin Tucker, he knows he stands on the shoulders of giants, and knowing that, he incorporates that into what he's doing. I think that's going to lead to something.
He reveres all his influences, and you hear him talk about it. Again, just the way that the kid conducts himself. And I'm not saying it. Another thing I say to people, you go from being, in awe of, let's say, your heroes, to you also want to be a peer.
Right.
Because, a good hero, and I talked about this with one of the younger kids the other day, how Joan Jett welcomed in these kids, the band that, got me all into this, and like they'd known them their whole lives, and they were blown away by, the humble, again, just being humble. And to see that your heroes are just like you, and they're the ones that paved the way for you and influenced you, and they took they basically took the bullets. So, especially the female artists, you see them now, 40 years ago, look what Joan Jett had to do. Mm-hmm. She had to create her own label to get, recorded as an individual.
Yep.
And they took a beating as a band, and with the Runaways, times have changed, but they're the ones that made it happen. And they could easily have an attitude, and they don't. If anything, they're even more humble and appreciative.
I think all the hard work and the hardships and what they had to overcome probably makes them more humble and makes them more apt to want to help somebody else coming up than the cop and attitude. I think it's the thing where, like, you don't appreciate something unless you work for it.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's true.
So those ones that had to work for it really appreciate it. And
because it seems like the ones that always the whole house of cards falls apart, or they got an attitude, or they piss off their whole fan base, are the ones that it came too easy.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it's gone.
Yep.
Then they learn and come back apologizing on their hands and knees. Sometimes you don't get a second chance.
Yeah, sometimes you don't get a second chance.
Especially nowadays, where again, and I understand why a lot of bands, artists, entertainers, everyone's under the microscope. Anything you say, you better be careful, because it's on the internet now forever.
You better be careful forever. It doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And
so your career can be gone like that. And just for anything, you didn't even mean it that way. Anything can be taken out of context. And
that's got to be a daunting thing for new artists too, is like, you don't want to write the wrong lyric, right? It might be socially relevant and okay now, but 20 years from now, like, they can come get you, apparently, like
what we've heard in the last few years, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Baby It's Cold Outside. I mean, Dean Martin is, and you gotta, it's hard. You're not going to convince people that aren't going to listen, but if you go back 50 years, that was the way things were. And now you look, people have grown and maybe somewhat matured and realize, that was wrong. But, trying to erase it doesn't change the fact that it happened.
Right. And
maybe that if you do, Baby It's Cold Outside, you know what he's really talking about. Yeah, we do. Right? Look at Motley Crue. What were they really talking about? Every song.
They weren't as polite about it.
No, right in your face. But are we gonna delete all their music or ban it or burn it and it like it never? No. You know, everyone changes. They even look back, and I'm sure when everyone's human beings, and they look back. Who knows when they're together and they go, "Holy shit, what the hell were we doing?" You know, you don't know.
And good music is good music.
They're not handing out halos to everyone as we walk in the door. You know, we're not angels.
Right.
But
and good music is good music. It doesn't matter. Like I know people who are not into Christian rock and or not of that faith, but they'll listen to Stryper because and they wrote them off in the 80s because they wore stripes and they were about Jesus or whatever. But like when they listen to the music, they're like, these guys are freaking awesome, and so it's good music's good music, like
never forget how I found Stryper. It was MTV. I was still living at home. No. I'm sorry, lie. I stopped at my parents' house. We're down in the basement with a family room. MTV was on, and I heard "Calling on You." And I was wow, who are these guys? And again, investigated it. I had no idea what the music, let's say, was about. So I got going on that. It was Record World. Bought the album, cassette, popped it in, and then I got it. I know what they're talking about. But it's amazing how many people. Now it didn't turn me off.
Right.
But people that I've had that might have heard it when hanging out or in my truck or riding around, and then when I told them who they were and what it was about, oh, I'm not going to listen. So wait a minute, what just changed?
Right.
They just say, I don't want to. This is another one of these I call discussions for another time.
Right.
People are just so fucking shallow or whatever, fickle or whatever the word is, and because So if it's okay if we're talking about things that are bad the other direction. Even Catholics that were friends of mine and Christians were like, oh, I can't, like you said, oh no, you're not going to play that in the church. Well, why? Because it's loud. Isn't it about the message?
Right.
I don't know, whatever. If you sing violin to a song about the devil, does that make it okay?
Right.
I don't get the thought process.
I dated this girl in high school and over like 2 or 3 years during high school. And her mother was, you got to go to church every Sunday or, like she was just devout. And Southern Baptist kind of, devout. And I was at her house, hanging out with my girlfriend one time, and I was playing, like, I think it was Petra, which was not a hard rock band. They were Christian rock, but they were not Stryper. They were not any of these other groups, right? And I was playing a Petra song, and it wasn't even a hard song. It was milk toast. And her mother heard it, and she's like, you can't play that. I'm like, this is Christian music. And I told her what the lyrics were, which were like straight Bible, like right. And she goes, you can't play the Lord's music with the devil's instruments. That was her quote.
Yep.
Meanwhile, on Sunday, it's got a country twang to it, but there's drums, electric guitar, electric bass, electric keyboards, right? Like same damn instruments. Like, that she called the devil's instruments, but because it had a Southern twang to it, it was okay for her because that's what she liked. She thought God's opinion was her opinion.
Well, apparently they don't play Christian music on the distortion channel of the amplifier, only the clean channel. So you got to it's the difference of pressing a button. Take the fuzz out of it, and now it's good. I'm going to hit you with one more question, Bob.
All right.
A new thing is, I'll give you a simple one because you're the guinea pig when it comes to what I call the fan series, bringing in just the regular fans.
Okay.
I'm going to just hit you with this one, and it's a question I've asked on Keep Rock Alive. I put up those just topics, or I ask for whatever it is at the moment. If you could book your ultimate personal dream triple bill, living or gone, who would they be?
Okay, so this is not necessarily new artists, but like anybody.
Anything. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't even have to be rock.
That's a hard question because I got a lot of favorites. I would say Stevie Ray Vaughan, because I got a chance to see him and went to work instead. 2 months later, he was dead. So Stevie Ray Vaughan, Iron Maiden, and Alice Cooper.
In that order, or how would they line up?
Oh, no. Yes, in that order. Stevie Ray Vaughan to open, Iron Maiden, and Alice Cooper. And
It's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
Not picturing that as Alice is the headliner. I think
Yeah.
they're cool with that.
Alice is like rock theater. There's so much going on at an Alice Cooper show.
Oh, he's brilliant.
You know.
He again, one of those guys ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And the way he presented rock and roll.
Yeah. And he's, you know, when I was a kid, he was on the Muppet Show. And I had heard songs on the radio. I knew School's Out, and I put that together with Alice Cooper in my head, right? I didn't know any other Alice Cooper songs. And when he was on the Muppet Show in 1979 or whatever it was, 1980, 1979, whatever, he did School's Out. He did Welcome to My Nightmare. When I was a kid, I was into haunted mansions and Dracula and werewolves, and especially like vampires, right? And when he came out and did Welcome to My Nightmare and he's dressed as a vampire, I was hooked, right? Boom. But then he sang You and Me, which was a ballad, which I had heard on the radio, but I was a kid, I never put that together with Alice Cooper. He's got bluesy stuff. He's got hard driving rock stuff. He's got really heartfelt ballads. He's got songs that tell stories, and he's got stories that go from album to album, decades, you know, like following certain characters. And I don't know a more well-rounded artist than Alice Cooper. He can do anything.
Somebody put it earlier today to me in another interview chat today and he's got the songs to back it up. A lot of times people just scratch the surface and not really go and see what these people have gotten and what they're capable of. And he's one of them. And that's why, look at it now. I mean, he's probably just as popular now as he was back in the 70s, if not more.
Yeah.
He adjusted a little bit to the 80s, but he never really left his core, you know. He stayed true to who he is and what he is right through it all.
Yeah.
But if you saw me hesitate before and heard it, the reason I almost ducked out of the camera was in the other room, I heard a cat fight. I wanted to go. I'm like, are you kidding me? And I don't know how they got in the room because I'm here alone right now, but oh well, I'll wipe up the blood. So, Robert, I mean, I appreciate it. This was very cool. And what I'm going to do, like I said, definitely do this again sometime, hopefully. And I'm going to cut out some key moments, and I definitely will tag the station in New York City in for you, because they need to hear your story of them. And
well, I
need to hear it.
I'm only one guy. I wish I was like a billionaire so that there's some bands I could like do something for, right? But all I can do is I can buy the CD and I can buy the digital album, you know, give them double money. I can go see them live whenever we get back to live music. I can buy t-shirts and merch. I always buy merch at every show I go to. The first concert I went to, I was 14. I didn't have the money for a t-shirt. And back then they were like $15. My dad's like, I'm not giving you $50 for a shirt. But now, like the last time I saw Iron Maiden last August, and I go to get the shirts and I come back to the seats before the show starts. And my buddy's like, how much did you spend on shirts? Because I bring a bag to put the shirts in. I'm like, $240. And I had seen them a month before that, and I spent $240 because I want that one and that one and that one. And then I think about the ones I didn't get. When I go see them the next month, I want that one and that one and that one.
I'm the other guy, because I say I've done my time and I've seen the bands. And if I see a new shirt that I like, then and I'll still like $40, $45. And I'll say, you know what that really costs to make that shirt? I'm that guy. Until it's
$2.
yeah, until it's one of the kids' bands, and I'll give them 50. You know, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
So they made their money already. How can they be prying more out of us? I'd rather spend that on these kids, you know, that open for them. But you don't have to do that, because what you're doing is what I hope more and more people will do. And this is what my biggest complaint on Keep Rock Alive is we have 19,000 now followers. And let's say a third of them are legit. How in the name of God am I only getting X amount of views and X amount of, you know, and I know it's not, but I like if people like you, I didn't know until just now you've been buying all this music. I knew you were very active, but now I've seen it, and I want other people to see it. Don't be afraid. My point is, don't be afraid to say it, especially in the thread with the band. Hey, love your music, bought your album, bought a t-shirt, bought a button, bought a bumper sticker, anything, say it. And so other people aren't afraid.
Yep. And so I share it too, right? So like I got a friend in the car, I go, you got to hear this group, you know, and I'll play Station, right? I got a friend of mine who went with me to a dozen or more Iron Maiden concerts between 1983 and now, right? Like he's into metal or whatever. He likes Alice Cooper, never saw him live. And I'm like, you've got to see him live, and you've got to hear his guitarist, right? So for the first time ever, he saw Alice Cooper live in 2017. And he and I have seen him live a few times together since, but he had never seen him live. And I took him to see him live, and I'm like, you got to hear Hurricane, right? You got to hear Nita Strauss. And so I got him hooked on her. And now like that's
all you got to do is light the fuse.
Yeah, that's the best thing. And so, you know, I can only do so much. I can buy the albums, I can go see them live and buy the merch, and I share it. When I got somebody in my car, they're listening to what I'm going to listen to, and I'm not going to give them the same old thing. I'm going to give them something new.
I mean,
that's all I can do.
Something people would do more just on Twitter or here is, you know, the people that are involved, and if they like a song, and I don't see it happen a lot, I'll see likes, but you know, a retweet is the same thing as you playing that song for your friend. So either you're embarrassed to admit that you like this band, and your friends who are, you know, no, I'm not saying you, I'm saying other people. If you
I don't care what anybody thinks.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is other people, what I'd like to see more of is if that person likes whichever song or band, if they retweet it, other people that I don't have or won't see Keep Rock Alive will see it. And that's how you spread the word. You know, and that's all that counts. And the rest, we've done our job. You just got to show the one person. And then, you know, what was the old Prella? I think it was the Prella, and she told two friends, and so on and so on and so on.
Right. Yeah.
That hair shampoo commercial was. That's all you got to do. Or if you want to put it into terms more, let's say, with, you know, today that people would understand, or the younger kids, you know, if you sneeze, you're going to give two people COVID-19. Think of that as a song. And then those people sneeze, right? More relatable to today. I mean, that's messed up, but still, I mean, it's the same thing. We want to spread the germ, which is rock and roll. And that's it. And don't be embarrassed if you're a rock fan. I said another thing today, be a rock fan, be rock and roll. It's not about being gentle. Do it. So that's it.
I think the world needs rock. I mean, everybody is too concerned with offending everybody or whatever, and rock and roll doesn't care.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, it's this. This is
right.
Right there in a nutshell. Don't even have to say it. Huh? Done. And then I keep forgetting it's not mirrored. I'm still learning how to be on a camera.
Yeah, that's all right.
But Bob, I appreciate it, man.
Sure.
Tonight I actually almost forgot I have another interview at 10 o'clock. A late entry, couple from Austin, Texas. You've probably seen them, the Metalbirds.
Yep.
They're cool.
Nice.
I'm gonna get their story next. And we got a whole bunch coming next week.
Awesome.
All right, man. I
I
appreciate it.
appreciate you. I appreciate the work you're doing, and I wouldn't be into some of the newer bands now if it wasn't for you that I'm into. So
I wouldn't keep doing it if I didn't have people like you that were actually listening, following through. That's it.
well, thanks, man.
All right, good dude. I appreciate it. I will. Did I call you Bob?
You did call me Bob, but I'll let it slide because I can't hit you from here.
But I caught it. Robert.
I think twice.
I'm not
Yeah.
deleting. I'm not editing. Sorry, I told you no editing whatsoever. So you can hold it against me as long as you like. I apologize. I formally apologize in the open. I actually
I think I'll survive.
Son of a bitch. I almost made it. All right, Robert. Thank you.
All right.
We'll catch you on the flip side.